The millionaire made fun of her dress at the charity ball, without imagining that she is the heir who donated 5 million. Before the story starts, write in the comments which city you are watching from. And at the end, do not forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story, everyone. Wallace Schmidt adjusted his watch on his wrist and walked through the Grand Hotel ballroom with a confident smile. That charity ball was his stage. At his side, Tyler could barely hold back his laughter. "I really cannot believe you are going to do this," Tyler whispered, holding his glass of champagne. "I am just going to give her a little help," Wallace answered, his eyes fixed on the woman in the checkered dress standing alone near the drinks table. "Someone needs to tell her she is in the wrong place." They walked closer, and Wallace waited until he was near enough for her, and a few people around, to hear him clearly. "Did someone get lost on the historical costume ball?" The woman turned slowly. She had brown hair pulled back in a simple bun, no flashy jewelry, and that red and white checkered dress that looked like it had come straight from the 50s. Her brown eyes met Wallace's. For a moment, he saw something in them. Hurt, maybe, but then she simply smiled. A polite, cold, distant smile. "Excuse me?" Her voice was soft. "The dress," Wallace gestured with his free hand, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Tyler let out a muffled laugh beside him. "Is it vintage, or do you really think red checkered fabric fits a gala event?" Some people turned their heads. Wallace felt that familiar rush of adrenaline, the same as when he closed $1 million deal. He was in control, on top. The woman did not answer right away. She just looked at him for another second, a look Wallace could not read, took a sip of champagne, and walked away toward the stage. "No sense of humor," Wallace muttered, turning to Tyler. "She is probably from the catering staff and got lost," Tyler laughed, giving his friend a pat on the back. "Relax." Wallace picked up another glass of champagne from a passing tray. He had almost forgotten the incident when the ballroom lights began to dim. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice of the master of ceremonies echoed through the speakers. "If you could please turn your attention to the stage." Wallace stifled a yawn. Boring charity speeches. The part he liked least about these events. "Tonight we have the honor of recognizing our main benefactor," the master of ceremonies continued, his voice full of respect. "An extraordinary woman who, with her unprecedented generosity, donated $5 million to our foundation." Wallace whistled softly. "5 million. Whoever it is has real money. Probably some rich old woman trying to clear her conscience," Tyler commented. "A discreet philanthropist who rarely seeks the spotlight, but whose impact on our community is immeasurable." The host paused dramatically. "Please welcome with a warm round of applause Miss Natalie Ross, heiress of the Ross Group." The ballroom exploded in applause, and Wallace felt the ground disappear under his feet. Walking up to the stage in that red and white checkered dress, gracefully waving to the standing crowd, was the woman he had just humiliated. The champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. The noise was drowned out by the deafening applause. "What is this?" Tyler whispered beside him, equally shocked. Wallace could not breathe. Natalie Ross. Natalie Ross. The billionaire heiress whose name was on half the skyscrapers in Manhattan, the woman whose family controlled an empire that made his company look like a lemonade stand. And he had made fun of her dress. The cameras were flashing non-stop, capturing every movement of Natalie on stage. Wallace realized with growing horror that cell phones had also filmed the earlier scene. He had been close enough. People had heard. "Thank you," Natalie said into the microphone, her voice filling the ballroom naturally. "It is an honor to support causes that make a real difference in people's lives." She paused, and her eyes scanned the crowd. When they found Wallace, they stopped for a fraction of a second. There was no anger in them, only absolute coldness. "I learned from my grandmother," Natalie continued, lightly touching the skirt of the checkered dress, "that true value is not in what we wear or own, but in what we do for others. This dress belonged to her, and wearing this piece tonight is my way of honoring her memory and the values she taught me." The ballroom fell silent for a moment. Then the applause started again, even louder, more intense. People wiped tears from their eyes. Wallace felt sick. "I hope everyone enjoys the evening," Natalie finished with a bright smile. She stepped down from the stage as the crowd moved closer, wanting to greet her. Executives, politicians, celebrities, all of them wanting a moment with the $5 million woman. "You are in big trouble," Tyler said, with no trace of humor. "Do you know who she is? The Ross Group controls half of Wall Street." "I know," Wallace practically shouted, running his hands through his hair. Panic was starting to take over. "I need to apologize, now." He started crossing the ballroom, but Natalie was surrounded by at least 20 people. It was impossible to get close. Wallace waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Finally, when the circle around her shrank slightly, he moved closer, his heart beating so loudly it felt like everyone could hear it. "Miss Ross," his voice came out shaky. "I would like to apologize." Natalie turned toward him and simply looked at him, from head to toe, as if she were evaluating something extremely uninteresting. Then, without saying a single word, she turned back to the couple beside her and continued the conversation they had started, as if Wallace did not exist. As if he were air. "Miss Ross, please." Wallace tried again, taking a step forward. "Excuse me," Natalie said, still not looking at him, her tone polite but as sharp as a blade. "I am in the middle of a conversation." The man beside her, an executive Wallace vaguely recognized, looked at him with one eyebrow raised and a scornful smile. Wallace stepped back, feeling his face burn. People were watching, whispering. Some were holding back smiles. Tyler appeared, pulling his arm. "Let's go. You are making everything worse." But Wallace stood there, paralyzed, watching Natalie move through the ballroom like a queen. She greeted important people, laughed, touched arms in a familiar way. The mayor kissed her hand. A famous Hollywood actor took a selfie with her. And that plaid dress Wallace had mocked? Under the ballroom lights, it shone. It was vintage, yes. But it was also elegant, unique, unforgettable. Much more interesting than the generic designer dresses all the other women were wearing. Natalie looked in his direction one more time. Just a quick glance. But Wallace felt the weight of it like a punch in the stomach. He was nothing to her. Less than nothing. "Come on, let's go," Tyler insisted, pulling him again. But Wallace could not take his eyes off Natalie Ross, the woman he had humiliated, the woman who now had all the power to destroy him with a single phone call, the woman who was now ignoring him as if he did not exist. And as he watched her disappear into the crowd of admirers, Wallace realized two things. First, he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Second, and even more terrifying, the consequences were only just beginning. The next morning, Wallace woke up feeling like he had been run over by a truck. Not because of the champagne he had barely drunk, but because of the crushing weight of the shame he had carried since the night before. He grabbed his phone from the bedside table and immediately regretted it. 17 unread messages, all from Tyler. "You became a meme. Seriously, look on Twitter. It's everywhere." Wallace sat up in bed in a jump, his heart racing. With trembling fingers, he opened the social media app and typed his own name. The first result was a video with 3 million views. The title said, "Arrogant businessman humiliates billionaire heiress without knowing who she is." Wallace pressed play and watched, horrified, as his own voice echoed, "Did someone get lost on the way to a period costume ball?" The camera then showed Natalie walking up to the stage, and the zoom closed in on his face, completely pale, mouth open, eyes wide. He looked like a fish out of water. The comments were even worse. "This guy needs a lesson in humility." His face when he found out who she was, priceless. Natalie Ross is a queen. That dress was beautiful and had a story. Wallace tossed the phone onto the bed and buried his face in his hands. He took a deep breath 3 times, trying to calm down. It did not work. The phone rang. It was Tyler. "Did you see it?" His friend's voice sounded tense. "I saw it," Wallace murmured. "There's more. The press found out who you are. Your name is being linked to the video on all the business news sites." "Great. Wonderful. And there's something else." Tyler paused. "Remember that investment your company was negotiating with the Horizon Foundation?" Wallace's stomach dropped. "I remember. They canceled today's meeting. No explanation." Wallace closed his eyes. The Horizon Foundation was crucial to expanding his tech company, and Natalie Ross was a member of the foundation's board. Coincidence? Impossible. "Tyler, what do I do?" "Honestly, pray." The call ended and Wallace sat on the bed staring into space. His perfect life was falling apart, all because of one stupid comment about a dress. 3 days went by, 3 days of torture. Every meeting Wallace tried to schedule was postponed or canceled. Emails that used to be answered in minutes were now left with no reply. An article in a business magazine called him the perfect example of out-of-control corporate arrogance. On Thursday morning, Wallace finally received an email from the Horizon Foundation. "Dear Mr. Schmidt, we would like to reschedule our meeting for Friday at 10 o'clock. Sincerely, Board of Directors." Wallace read the email 5 times, looking for traps between the lines. There were none. At least none that were obvious. On Friday, he arrived at the Horizon Foundation headquarters 15 minutes early, wearing his best suit and a conservative tie. The building was impressive, glass and steel, with the name Ross engraved discreetly at the entrance. The receptionist greeted him with a professional smile. "Mr. Schmidt, please follow me." She led him down an elegant hallway to a conference room on the 10th floor. Wallace walked in and felt the air leave his lungs. Natalie Ross was sitting at the head of the table, flipping through documents with a focused expression. She wore a perfectly tailored gray blazer and reading glasses that made her look even more intimidating. When Wallace walked in, she slowly lifted her eyes. "Mr. Schmidt," she said, taking off her glasses. "Punctual. I appreciate that." Her voice was polite, almost friendly, but her eyes? Cold as ice. "Miss Ross," Wallace managed to say, his throat dry, "I thank you for seeing me." "Please, sit down." Wallace pulled out the chair, his hands sweating. Natalie kept looking at him with that neutral expression that revealed nothing. "So," she began, folding her hands on the table, "your proposal for the foundation." "Yes, Let me be direct, Mr. Schmidt," Natalie gently interrupted him. "We reviewed your company. The numbers are impressive. The technology you develop has real potential to impact underserved communities." Wallace felt a spark of hope. "Thank you, However," she went on, and the hope died instantly, "we have some concerns about your company's corporate culture." Wallace swallowed hard. "Corporate culture?" "Yes." Natalie picked up a folder and opened it. "We received 3 anonymous reports from employees in the last 6 months. Allegations of a hostile work environment, inappropriate jokes, lack of sensitivity in matters of diversity." Each word was like a knife. Wallace knew exactly what she meant. He had ignored those complaints, considering them exaggerations from people who were too sensitive. "Ms. Ross, I can explain." "No need," she raised her hand delicately. "I am just stating facts. You see, Mr. Schmidt, the Horizon Foundation does not invest only in technology. We invest in people, in values, in character." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "And frankly, I am not sure your company reflects the values we are looking for." The silence that followed was deafening. Wallace tried to find words, any words, but he was completely lost. Natalie simply watched him, waiting. Finally, he managed to speak. "Miss Ross, about the ball. I was completely wrong. It was unforgivable." "It was," she agreed calmly. Is it what? Unforgivable?" Wallace blinked, confused. I do not understand." Natalie leaned back in her chair, a small smile, almost imperceptible, touching her lips. "Mr. Schmidt, have you ever stopped to think about why you made that comment?" I was foolish. Arrogant. I judged by appearance." "Yes, you did. But why?" she asked, now genuinely curious. "What is it in you that sees a woman wearing a simple dress and feels the need to humiliate her in public?" The question caught him off guard. Wallace opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "I do not know," he finally admitted, his voice weak. "Then find out," Natalie said, standing up. "Because until you understand your own motivations, Mr. Schmidt, nothing you say will be a real apology. It will only be empty words." She walked to the window, looking out over the city below. "This meeting is over. We will postpone our decision about the investment for another 30 days. Use that time wisely." Wallace remained seated, stunned. Then Natalie turned, and for the first time, he saw something different in her eyes. It was not anger, it was not contempt, it was disappointment. And somehow, that was infinitely worse. "Miss Ross?" Wallace stood up quickly. "Give me a chance to prove I can be better." Natalie studied him for a long moment. "Everyone deserves a chance, Mr. Schmidt," she finally said. "But chances have to be earned, not asked for." She walked to the door and opened it, a clear sign that the conversation was over. Wallace walked past her, feeling smaller than ever. But before he left completely, he stopped. "The dress," he said quietly without looking back. "Was it your grandmother's?" There was a pause. "It was," Natalie answered, her voice softening a little. "She wore it the day she met my grandfather. She said it was the happiest day of her life." Wallace nodded, a strange pain tightening in his chest. "It was beautiful," he said. "It is beautiful. I was wrong." Another silence. "You can go now, Mr. Schmidt." Wallace left the room, and the door closed behind him with a soft click. While he waited for the elevator, he realized something disturbing. For the first time in years, he cared about what someone thought of him. He really cared. And that person was exactly the one he had hurt. The elevator doors opened, and Wallace stepped in, pressing the button for the lobby. 30 days. He had 30 days to find out who he really was, and maybe, just maybe, to become someone better. Wallace spent the weekend locked in his apartment, avoiding phone calls and lost in thoughts that would not let him rest. On Monday morning, he woke up with an idea that seemed absurd and brilliant at the same time. If Natalie wanted him to discover who he really was, he needed to go back to where it all began. 3 hours later, Wallace parked his imported car in front of a worn-out building in Brooklyn. The neighborhood where he had grown up seemed smaller than in his memories, but the essence was the same. Children played on the sidewalk, music drifted from open windows, and the smell of home-cooked food hung in the air. He went up the stairs to the 3rd floor and knocked on the door of apartment 17. A black woman with gray hair opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise. "Wallace Schmidt? My goodness, boy, how long has it been?" "Hi, Mrs. Helen?" Wallace gave a shy smile. "About 5 years, I think." Helen had been the neighbor who took care of him when his mother worked 3 different jobs. She pulled him into a tight hug that smelled of cinnamon and vanilla. Come in, come in. You look so different, all dressed in a suit and so elegant." The apartment was small but cozy, full of photographs and plants. Wallace sat on the same sofa where he used to do his homework while Helen made coffee. "So what brings you here after so long?" she asked, serving 2 cups. Wallace hesitated. "I made a terrible mistake, Mrs. Helen, and I need to understand why I did it." "What kind of mistake?" "I judged someone by their appearance. I said cruel things about a woman just because she was wearing a simple dress." Helen took a sip of coffee, watching him closely. "And why did you do that?" "I don't know. That's why I'm here." "Wallace," Helen leaned forward, "do you remember when you were 12 and you got those expensive sneakers from the school donation program?" Wallace nodded slowly. He had received a pair of brand-name sneakers from a charity drive and wore them for months until they were completely worn out. "Do you remember what happened?" "I stopped playing with Tommy," Wallace said, the memory slowly coming back, "because he wore old sneakers." "Exactly," Helen nodded. "You were so afraid of being the poor boy again that you started to reject everything that reminded you of where you came from." Her words hit Wallace like a punch. He swallowed hard, feeling a lump in his throat. "I never stopped to think about that." "We rarely stop," Helen said with a sad smile. "But when you forget where you came from, you end up forgetting who you are." Wallace left Helen's apartment 2 hours later with a heavier heart and a clearer mind. He had work to do. The next morning, Wallace did something he had not done in years. He searched on Google for social projects in New York, and it did not take long for him to find a pattern. Natalie Ross's name appeared quietly in at least 15 different organizations: orphanages, community centers, education programs. She funded everything, but never appeared in the official photos or at the publicity events. One project in particular caught his attention: the Hope Community Center in the Bronx. The schedule showed that there were activities with children every Wednesday and Friday. It was Wednesday. Wallace arrived at the center at 3 in the afternoon, wearing jeans and a simple shirt. The building was colorful, with murals painted on the outside walls showing children playing and studying. He went in, a little hesitant. The reception area was busy, with children running from one side to the other and volunteers organizing activities. "Can I help you?" a young blonde woman asked, smiling. "I would like to volunteer," Wallace said, the words coming out before he could think twice. "That's great. We are always in need of help. Do you have any experience with children?" "None," Wallace admitted. "No problem. Come with me. I'll show you the place." She led him down a hallway full of children's drawings hanging on the walls. At the end, there was a large room where about 20 children were doing different activities. Some were drawing, others were putting puzzles together, some were reading, and supervising everything with a colorful apron over a white blouse was Natalie Ross. Wallace stopped in the doorway, frozen. Natalie looked up and saw him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she said something to a child beside her and walked toward him. "Mr. Schmidt," she said, her voice neutral. "What an interesting surprise." "I came to volunteer," Wallace stammered. "Apparently." Natalie crossed her arms. "And how did you find out about this center?" "I did some research. I saw your name connected to several projects." "So you followed me?" "No, it wasn't like that. I just wanted to better understand what you do, who you are." Natalie studied him for a long moment. Wallace could feel the weight of her gaze, as if she were reading every thought in his head. "All right," she finally said. "Since you're here, you can help organize the art supplies. The children love to paint, but they turn this place into a war zone." "I can do that," Wallace said quickly. "Great, follow me." She led him to a table covered with paints, brushes, paper, and glitter spread everywhere. 3 children were painting enthusiastically, creating works that were more abstract than intentional. "Children, this is Mr. Wallace," Natalie announced. "He's going to help you today." A girl of about 7 looked at him with curiosity. "Do you know how to paint?" "A little," Wallace lied. "Liar," the girl said immediately, making Natalie let out a short laugh. "Emily has a built-in lie detector," Natalie explained, her eyes shining with amusement. "It's better to be honest with her." "All right," Wallace knelt down to be at Emily's eye level. "I don't know how to paint anything, but can I learn?" Emily thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but you have to paint a dinosaur with me." "Dinosaur? All right, I can do that." He couldn't. 40 minutes later, Wallace was covered in green paint, had glitter in his hair, and his dinosaur looked more like a mutant potato. Emily laughed so hard she had to hold on to the table. "It's the worst dinosaur I've ever seen." She burst out laughing. "I completely agree," Wallace admitted, laughing too. On the other side of the room, Natalie watched the scene while pretending to organize books. She saw Wallace genuinely relaxed for the first time, playing with the children without the mask of arrogance he used as armor. When the activity ended and the children left with their parents, Wallace stayed to help clean up. Natalie worked in silence beside him, putting things away. "Thank you for the help," she finally said. "It was fun, actually," Wallace admitted. "I didn't remember how good it feels to just be simple." Natalie stopped what she was doing and looked at him. "You said you wanted to understand who I am. Why?" Wallace took a deep breath. "Because you challenged me to understand who I am, and I realized I can't do that without understanding why you affect me so much." "I affect you?" Natalie raised an eyebrow. "Yes," Wallace said honestly. "You make me question everything I thought I knew about myself." Natalie stayed quiet for a moment. Then she grabbed her bag and turned to leave. "Same time Friday," she said without looking back. "If you really want to understand, you need more than one afternoon." Wallace stood there in the empty room, his heart beating fast. It was a beginning. On Friday, Wallace arrived at the community center 15 minutes early, carrying a box of art supplies he had bought at a specialty store. Non-toxic paints, good quality brushes, colored paper, and even modeling clay. The same blonde receptionist from the previous time smiled when she saw him. "You came back, and you brought presents. The children are going to love it." "I hope so," Wallace said, feeling strangely nervous. He went to the activity room and found Natalie organizing books on a shelf. She was wearing jeans and an aqua-green blouse, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, completely different from the powerful executive at the meeting. "On time again?" She commented without turning around. "You're starting to make a habit of it. I learned that you value punctuality." Natalie finally looked at him, her eyes dropping to the box he was carrying. "What is that?" "Art supplies. I thought the center could use them." "You can leave it there on the table," she pointed, her expression neutral. "The children arrive in 10 minutes. Wallace put the box where she pointed and stood there, not knowing what to do with his hands. Natalie kept organizing books, apparently ignoring his presence. "Can I help with anything?" he asked. "You can arrange the chairs in a circle. Today we are going to read stories before the activities. Wallace started moving the small chairs, and the silence between them was so dense he could almost touch it. Finally, he could not take it anymore. Are you angry with me? Natalie stopped and looked at him. Why would I be angry? Because, well, I showed up here out of nowhere. I invaded your space. Mr. Schmidt, she sighed, this is a community center. It is literally a public space, and we accept all volunteers. But you did not want me to be here. I did not say that. You also did not say you wanted me here. Natalie closed the book she was holding with more force than necessary. What do you want me to say? That I am surprised? I am. That I am suspicious of your intentions? I am that too. But I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt because, believe it or not, I do not like to judge people too quickly. The irony of that sentence was not lost on Wallace. He opened his mouth to answer, but at that moment, the children started to arrive. Emily was the first to come in, her eyes lighting up when she saw Wallace. You came back? And did you bring your hair full of glitter again? Not today, Wallace laughed, but I brought new supplies for us to paint. Really? Emily ran to the box and peeked inside. Wow, there's paint that glows in the dark. Soon the room was full of excited children exploring the new supplies. Natalie watched everything with an expression Wallace could not read. All right, everyone. She clapped her hands to get their attention. Before we start painting, let us sit in a circle for today's story. The children sat down quickly, and Wallace stood there not knowing where to go. Natalie pointed to a small chair next to Emily. Sit down, Mr. Schmidt. You need to listen too. Wallace squeezed himself into the child-sized chair, his knees almost touching his chin. Some children laughed, and he felt his face grow warm. Natalie picked up an illustrated book and started to read. It was a story about a dragon who was afraid to fly and pretended to be fierce to hide his insecurity. Her voice changed for each character, making the children laugh and get completely involved. Wallace found himself fascinated, not by the story, but by the way Natalie told it. She was natural, funny, completely at ease. There was no calculation, no mask. It was just... Huh. When she finished, the children clapped. And what was the dragon's lesson? Natalie asked. That pretending to be something we are not does not help, Emily answered excitedly. Exactly, Natalie smiled. Sometimes, being who we really are is the bravest thing we can do. Her eyes met Wallace's for a second, and he felt as if she had just sent a message directly to him. The children spread out for their activities, and Wallace joined a group that wanted to make collages. A little girl named Sophie, about 6 years old, was showing him how to glue pieces of colored paper to make flowers. You are not very good at this, Sophie observed with the brutal honesty typical of children. No, I am not, Wallace agreed, looking at his crooked flower. But you're getting better, she added generously. Last week, your dinosaur was terrible. On the other side of the room, Natalie let out a quiet laugh. Wallace looked at her and, for the first time, she smiled back. A small but genuine smile. An hour later, when the activities ended and the parents started to pick up the children, Wallace helped clean up the mess. Natalie worked beside him, putting supplies away. You did well today, she said casually. Really? The children liked you. Sophie is usually shy with new people. She told me my flower was ugly. And it was, Natalie agreed, her eyes shining with humor. But at least you were trying. Wallace laughed, surprised that he did not feel offended. I guess it is a start. It is. They finished cleaning in a comfortable silence. When everything was organized, Natalie picked up her bag. There is a cafe nearby, she said, without looking directly at him. They make very good hot chocolate. Do you want to go? Wallace felt his heart speed up. Yes, I would like that. 10 minutes later, they were sitting in a cozy cafe 2 blocks from the center. Natalie ordered hot chocolate with marshmallows, and Wallace ordered the same. So, Natalie stirred her hot chocolate with a small spoon. Are you going to tell me what you are really doing here? And do not give me the story that you just wanted to volunteer. Wallace took a deep breath. Honesty. That was what she wanted. You told me to find my motivations. So I went back to the neighborhood where I grew up. I talked to people who knew me before I had money. And I realized something. What? That I spent the last few years running away from who I was, and when I saw you in that dress, so comfortable with yourself, not needing to prove anything to anyone, it scared me. Because it reminded me of everything I was trying to forget. Natalie watched him for a long moment, taking a sip of the hot chocolate. And now, she asked, what do you want? I want to learn to be like you. Like me? Authentic, real, not afraid of being simple. Natalie let out a short laugh. Mr. Schmidt, you idealize me too much. I am not perfect. Far from it. I know, but you are genuine, and that is rare. They stayed in silence for a moment. Natalie stirred the hot chocolate absent-mindedly, clearly thinking about something. Okay, she said finally. I will make a deal with you. What kind of deal? Keep coming to the center, not once or twice, but for real. Commit to it, and I will teach you what I learned from my grandmother about how to live an authentic life. Wallace felt a wave of gratitude. Really? But there are conditions. Natalie raised a finger. No special privileges. You will work like any other volunteer. You will clean, you will organize, you will do the boring tasks. And if I notice that this is just an act to impress the foundation or to clean up your public image, it is over. It is not, Wallace said firmly. I swear it is not. We will see. Natalie finished the hot chocolate. Next Wednesday, 3 o'clock. Do not be late. She stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked to the door. But before leaving, she turned around. And Mr. Schmidt, thank you for the art supplies. It was kind of you. Then she left, leaving Wallace alone with his hot chocolate and a silly smile on his face. For the first time in weeks, he felt something he had forgotten how to feel. Hope. 3 weeks had passed since that conversation at the cafe, and Wallace had not missed a single day at the Hope Community Center. Wednesdays and Fridays, right at 3 o'clock, he was there. And not just to impress Natalie, but because he genuinely liked being there. The next Wednesday, Wallace arrived earlier than usual and found Natalie struggling with a heavy box near the entrance. Let me help, he said, taking the box from her hands. Thank you. These are new books for the center's library. They weigh more than they look. Wallace carried the box to the reading room, and Natalie followed him with a smaller one. So, she began as they arranged the books on the shelves, today is going to be different. Different how? We are going to visit an orphanage that partners with the center. It is an outside activity we do once a month. Wallace felt his stomach tighten slightly. An orphanage? Yes, the Sunflower Children's Home in Queens. We take the kids from here to interact with the kids there. It helps both groups develop empathy and friendship. That sounds good. It is good, Natalie smiled, but it is also messy, loud, and chaotic. Are you ready for that? I was born ready? Wallace lied with conviction. He was not ready at all. 2 hours later, Wallace was sitting on the floor of a huge room, surrounded by 15 kids shouting, running, and arguing about who would build the tallest block tower. The noise was deafening, and he had already been hit in the head by 3 plastic blocks. This is not structural engineering, he tried to explain to an 8-year-old boy named Danny. You need a wider base. No, I don't. I know what I'm doing. Danny insisted, stacking more blocks onto a tower that was already dangerously tilted. On the other side of the room, Natalie watched the scene while pretending to help a group of girls with puzzles. Wallace looked completely lost, but he was trying. That counted for something. Danny's tower inevitably collapsed, scattering blocks everywhere. The boy looked at Wallace with an accusing expression. You distracted me. That is why it fell. I warned you about the base. Wallace protested. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. Natalie walked over before the argument got worse. Is everything okay here, you two? He knocked down my tower, Danny accused. I did not knock it down. It fell because physics exists. Natalie held back a laugh. How about you try together this time? Mr. Schmidt can show his technique, and Danny can add creativity. The two looked at each other with suspicion, but agreed to try. 10 minutes later, they had built the tallest tower in the room, and Danny was jumping up and down, celebrating as if he had won the World Cup. See? I told you I knew what I was doing, Danny shouted. Wallace opened his mouth to argue, but saw Natalie shaking her head discreetly. He sighed. Yes, you were right. Good job, partner. Danny smiled and ran off to show the tower to his friends. Wallace stood up, brushing the dust off his pants. Physics exists, Natalie repeated, her eyes shining with amusement. Well, it does. You were arguing with an 8-year-old child about structural engineering. He started it. Natalie laughed, and Wallace realized it was the first time he had really heard her laugh. The sound was light, genuine, and made something strange happen in his chest. The rest of the afternoon went by quickly. Wallace helped the children with several activities, and when it was time to clean everything up, he was exhausted but strangely satisfied. As they were putting away the last toys, one of the orphanage staff members walked up to Natalie. "Natalie, there is a problem with the scaffolding outside," he said, worried. "The workers left it unstable when they went home early, and there will be no one to fix it until tomorrow." "Where is it?" Natalie asked immediately. "In the back courtyard, near the play area." Wallace followed them to the courtyard. The scaffolding was set up near a wall that was being painted, but it was clearly unstable. One of the bases was not fixed properly. "I will put caution tape around it," the staff member said, "so no one gets close." "Good idea," Natalie agreed. They were heading back inside when they heard a scream. Wallace turned and felt his blood run cold. A little girl, no more than 5 years old, had slipped out through the back door and was under the scaffolding, picking up a ball that had rolled there. And the scaffolding was swaying dangerously. Wallace did not think. He just ran. He reached the girl at the exact moment the structure started to give way. He grabbed the child in his arms and turned his body, placing himself between her and the falling metal tubes. The impact was strong. Wallace felt a sharp pain in his shoulder and back when the tubes hit him, but he kept the girl protected against his chest. They hit the ground, and Wallace used his own body as a shield until everything stopped falling. The silence that followed was broken by the girl's scared crying. "It is all right, you are safe," Wallace murmured, still holding her even with pain throbbing through his whole body. Natalie came running, followed by the staff. "My God, Wallace!" She knelt beside them. "Are you okay?" "The girl, is she hurt?" he asked, still dizzy. Natalie carefully took the child from his arms. The girl was crying, but she did not have a single scratch. "She is fine. She is perfect," Natalie said, her voice unsteady. "But you are bleeding." Wallace looked at his shoulder and saw that his shirt was torn and stained with blood. The pain started to grow stronger now that the adrenaline was fading. "Oh yes, I think I am. We are taking you to the hospital. Now," Natalie ordered the staff, who were already running, to call an ambulance. "There is no need for an ambulance." Wallace tried to stand up and immediately regretted it when pain exploded in his back. "Okay, maybe there is." Natalie held his hand, and Wallace realized she was trembling. "Are you completely crazy?" she whispered. "That could have been much worse." "The girl?" "I know. You saved her." Natalie squeezed his hand. It was the bravest and most foolish thing I have ever seen anyone do." Wallace tried to smile, but even that hurt. "So I am improving? Be quiet and stop moving," she ordered, but there were tears in her eyes. The ambulance arrived quickly, and the paramedics began to examine Wallace. He had a cut on his shoulder and possible bruises on his back and left arm. "We are going to take you for some tests," one of the paramedics explained. "I'm going with him," Natalie said immediately. "You do not have to," Wallace began. "I am going," she repeated in a tone that did not allow discussion. At the hospital, after x-rays and stitches in his shoulder, Wallace was released with pain medication and instructions to rest. Natalie had stayed in the waiting room the whole time. When he came out, she stood up at once. "How are you?" "Sore, but alive." "Come on, I will drive you home." In the car, during the ride, they stayed in silence. Natalie drove with focus, but Wallace could tell she was processing something. "Thank you," she said at last, "for saving that girl. You did not hesitate for a second." "I did not think. I just acted." "Exactly." Natalie looked at him briefly before turning her eyes back to the road. "And that showed me something important about you." "What?" "That maybe you are not who I thought you were." Wallace felt something change in that moment, as if a door that had been closed had opened just a crack. "Tomorrow," Natalie said when she stopped in front of his building, "I'm going to visit you. We need to talk." "About what?" "About who you really are, Wallace Schmidt," she said with a slight smile. The next morning, Wallace woke up with his whole body aching. Every movement was a reminder of the accident, but strangely, he did not regret anything. He was having coffee when the doorbell rang. Natalie was at the door, holding a paper bag and 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning. I brought coffee and donuts. May I come in?" Of course, Wallace opened the door wider, trying not to make a pained face. She walked in and looked around the luxurious apartment with a neutral expression. Nice. Very different from Brooklyn. Yes, Wallace admitted, taking one of the cups. Thank you for the coffee. They sat in the living room, and for a moment they were both quiet. Natalie nibbled on a donut, watching him closely. How is your back? Sore, but I will survive. You were very brave yesterday, she said, or very reckless. I still have not decided which. Probably both. Natalie smiled slightly. Probably. She took a sip of coffee and leaned back on the sofa. So, let's talk. For real this time. Wallace nodded, feeling his heart speed up. You told me you wanted to understand who I am, Natalie began. But I also need to understand you. And not the millionaire businessman or the volunteer who showed up out of nowhere. I want to know who Wallace Schmidt is when all the masks come off. I do not know if you will like what you find. Let me decide that. Wallace took a deep breath and started to talk. He told her about growing up in Brooklyn, about his mother working 3 jobs, about wearing worn-out sneakers at school while other kids had brand-name ones. About the shame he felt, the anger, the determination to get out of that place. When my company took off, it was like finally breathing after being underwater for years, he explained. I bought everything I had always wanted, expensive clothes, an imported car, an apartment in Manhattan, and I surrounded myself with people who would never remind me of where I came from. Like Tyler, Natalie observed. Like Tyler, Wallace agreed. He represented everything I thought I wanted to be. Rich from birth, no worries, no past to hide. And at the gala? Wallace paused, the shame returning with full force. When I saw you in that dress, you looked so comfortable, so calm being simple, and that scared me because it reminded me of everything I was trying to forget. So I attacked, as if humiliating you would somehow validate my choices. It was cruel, Natalie said plainly. It was. And I am sorry, truly. Natalie was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she stood up and walked to the window, looking at the city below. May I tell you a story? She asked. Of course. My grandmother used to say there are 2 ways to deal with pain. You can build walls to keep it away, or you can build bridges to rise above it. Natalie turned to face him. You built walls, Wallace. Walls made of money, arrogance, and denial. And you? Wallace asked. How did you deal with your pain? Natalie came back to the sofa, but this time she sat closer to him. I was 7 years old when I lost my parents in a car accident, she began, and Wallace felt his chest tighten. In 1 second I had a happy family, and in the next I was living with my grandmother in a 2-room apartment in Queens. Natalie, I did not know. Few people know. My grandmother was a housekeeper. She worked hard, earned little, but never complained. She taught me that true wealth is not in your bank account, but in the people you love and the lives you touch. Wallace listened in silence as she continued. When I was 25, a distant uncle I did not even know died and left me a fortune. Out of nowhere, I was a billionaire. I could have done what you did, forget everything, reinvent myself, pretend the past did not exist. But you did not. No, because my grandmother taught me better than that. She used to say that forgetting where we came from is like a tree trying to deny its roots. It may seem to work for a while, but eventually you fall. Wallace felt tears sting his eyes. Your grandmother sounds like she was an amazing person. She was. She passed away 2 years ago, Natalie smiled sadly, but she left a legacy that I try to honor every day. The plaid dress, it was hers. She wore it to her high school prom. She said it was the night she met my grandfather, and her life changed forever. When I inherited the fortune, I kept that dress as a reminder that no matter how much money I have, my values come from that humble woman who raised me. Wallace swallowed hard, the guilt weighing on his chest like lead. And I made fun of that. I made fun of her memory. Yes, Natalie said simply, you did. How can you be here? How can you even give me a chance after that? Natalie looked him in the eyes, and Wallace saw compassion there, but also firmness. Because my grandmother also taught me about forgiveness. She used to say that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. And because, she paused, I saw you yesterday. I saw who you are when you are not trying to prove anything. And that man, he is worth knowing." Wallace could not hold back any longer. Tears ran down his face, and he did not try to hide them. "I do not deserve your kindness." "Probably not," Natalie agreed, but there was a touch of humor in her voice. "But I am going to give it to you anyway. With one condition." "What condition?" "Stop running away from who you are. Stop being ashamed of where you came from. Because that boy from Brooklyn, who worked hard to build a company from nothing, that boy is much more impressive than any persona you created." Wallace wiped his face, feeling something change inside him. As if old chains were breaking. "I do not know if I can do that." "Then learn. I will help you, but you need to do the work." "Why?" Wallace asked. "Why do you care?" Natalie stayed quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Because I recognize pain when I see it, and because I believe people can change if they really want to." "Do you want that, Wallace?" "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "More than anything." "Then prove it." She stood up to leave, and Wallace stood up too, ignoring the pain in his back. "Natalie?" "Yes?" "Thank you for everything, for the second chance, for your honesty, for showing me there is another way to live." She smiled, and this time it was a real smile that reached her eyes. "Do not thank me yet. The hard work is just beginning." She walked to the door, but before leaving she turned once more. "Oh, and Wallace, next time I visit you, I want to meet the real Wallace. Not the businessman, not the beginner philanthropist, just you. Can you do that?" Wallace nodded, feeling something like hope blooming in his chest. "I can try." "Good, because that is the Wallace I would like to get to know better." And then she left, leaving Wallace standing at the door, looking at the empty hallway and realizing that, for the first time in years, he really wanted to be himself. Not the polished and successful version, just Wallace. The boy from Brooklyn who never should have been ashamed of his roots. And maybe, just maybe, there was still time to find his way back to that boy. 2 weeks had passed since that conversation, and Wallace had returned to volunteer work with renewed commitment. His back still hurt sometimes, but he ignored the discomfort. On the following Wednesday, Wallace arrived at the community center carrying boxes of children's books he had bought at a sale. Natalie was at the front desk talking to the coordinator, and when she saw him, her eyes shone with amusement. "More donations? You are going to go broke at this rate." "They are used. I found them at a book fair," Wallace explained, setting the boxes on the floor. "I thought the children would like them." "They are going to love them." Natalie came closer and peeked inside one of the boxes. "Oh, there are even some classics here." "Good choice." They started organizing the books in the center's library, working side by side in a comfortable silence. Wallace realized he had begun to enjoy these quiet moments with her just as much as their conversations. "So," Natalie broke the silence, "next week there is a charity event I need to attend. Nothing very big, just a fundraising dinner for the literacy program." "It sounds important." "It is, but it is also boring." She made a face. "A lot of rich people pretending to care while they take selfies for Instagram." Wallace laughed. "You do not like these events very much, do you?" "I hate them, but they are part of the job. Someone has to make sure the money goes where it really matters." She paused, biting her lip as if she were considering something. "Would you like to go with me?" Wallace almost dropped the stack of books he was holding. "Really? It would be good to have company. Someone who understands the real purpose of these things, not just the show." "I would love to," Wallace said, trying not to look as excited as he felt. "Great, but I am warning you now, it is formal attire. And before you ask, no, you cannot show up in jeans." "I did not even think of that." "Of course not," Natalie smiled, clearly not believing him. The following Saturday, Wallace was standing in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. He had chosen a simple suit, elegant but not showy. He wanted to make a good impression, but he also wanted to be authentic. When he arrived at the address Natalie had sent, he was surprised to find out it was her house, not the event location. Natalie opened the door wearing an emerald green dress that was elegant and discreet at the same time. Nothing extravagant, but perfectly suitable. "Right on time as always," she commented. "Come in, I just need to get my purse." Wallace walked in and looked around. The house was spacious but cozy, decorated with good taste without being exaggerated. There were photos everywhere. Natalie as a child with an elderly lady who must have been her grandmother. Natalie in several social projects, smiling children. "Your house is beautiful," he said when she came back. "Thank you. It is too big for me alone, but I cannot let it go. It was the first thing I bought when I inherited the money. I wanted to have a place where I could keep all the memories." In the car on the way to the event, Natalie prepared him. There will be a lot of important people there. Some will be genuine, others will only be there for appearances. The trick is to find out who is who. How do you do that? I ask about the specific projects that the foundation supports. If the person knows details, it is because they really care. If they are vague or change the subject, they are there just for the photo. Wallace took in the lesson. The more time he spent with Natalie, the more he saw how sharp and observant she was. The event was at an elegant club on the Upper East Side. When they walked in, several heads turned. Wallace saw recognition in the eyes of some people. The video from the ball was clearly still fresh in many people's minds. "Ignore it," Natalie murmured beside him. "Do not let them affect you." They walked around the room, and Wallace watched fascinated as Natalie interacted with people. She was charismatic, funny, but she could also guide each conversation back to the purpose of the event. Natalie, a woman in her 60s, came over wearing jewelry that probably cost more than a car. "Dear, it has been so long. Hello, Helen. How is Thomas?" "Fine, fine. He just bought a new yacht. Can you believe it?" "That is wonderful." Natalie smiled politely. "And how is his support for the literacy program?" "Last year, he mentioned being interested in funding 3 reading rooms." Helen blinked, clearly caught by surprise. "Ah, yes, the rooms. He is still considering." "I understand. Well, if you need more information about the impact of the program, I have all the data. We can arrange a coffee?" Of course. I will check his schedule." When Helen walked away, Wallace leaned toward Natalie. "She is not going to call, is she?" "Not at all." Natalie laughed softly. "But now she knows that I know, and that is already something." Wallace was starting to relax when he saw Tyler on the other side of the room. His friend saw him at the same time, and his expression was pure shock. Tyler came closer, his eyes going back and forth between Wallace and Natalie. "Wallace? What are you doing here?" "I came with Natalie," Wallace said simply. "With Natalie Ross?" Tyler lowered his voice. "The same Natalie you... at the ball?" "Yes, Tyler, the same." Natalie held out her hand with an icy smile. "Tyler, right? It is a pleasure to finally meet you officially." Tyler shook her hand, still confused. "The pleasure is mine, Miss Ross. I did not know you two were friends." "We are working together on some social projects," Natalie explained. "Wallace has been a dedicated volunteer." "Wallace? A volunteer?" Tyler laughed as if it were the funniest joke in the world. "Really? You?" Wallace felt his irritation grow. "Why is that so hard to believe?" "Because I have known you for 10 years, and I have never seen you do anything for free in your life." "People change, Tyler." "Yes, of course they do." Tyler looked at Natalie with a suggestive smile, especially when they have the right motivation. Wallace took a step forward, but Natalie touched his arm gently. "Excuse us, Tyler," she said, her voice sweet but with a touch of steel. "I need to steal Wallace for a moment so he can meet some important people. It was a pleasure." She led him away before Wallace could answer. "Take a breath," she murmured. "He is not worth it. He is an idiot, I know, but if you let yourself be affected, it only proves his point." Wallace took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. Natalie was right. The rest of the evening went by more smoothly. Wallace met several interesting people and had genuine conversations about the Foundation's projects. And every time someone looked at him with recognition from the viral video, Natalie subtly directed the attention to something else. When the event ended and they were going back to the car, Wallace felt strangely satisfied. "Thank you for inviting me," he said. "Thank you for going. You did well." "Even with Tyler?" "Especially with Tyler. You could have exploded, but you did not. That is growth." Wallace smiled. "I learned from the best." They drove in comfortable silence until Natalie stopped in front of his building. "Wallace?" she called when he was getting out of the car. "Yes? Do you remember when I asked you to show me the real Wallace?" "I remember." Today I saw him, and I liked very much what I saw. Wallace felt his heart speed up. Really? Seriously, you are becoming the person you always were underneath all those defenses. She smiled, and Wallace realized he had started to depend on that smile more than he should. Good night, Wallace. Good night, Natalie. He walked into the building, and when he reached the apartment, he could not stop smiling. For the first time in a long time, Wallace Schmidt liked who he was becoming. And all thanks to a woman in a plaid dress who had seen him for who he really was, and still decided he was worth getting to know. In the following weeks, Wallace and Natalie started spending more time together, not only at the community center, but also in cafes, walks in the park, and simple dinners. The chemistry between them grew with each meeting. The next Friday, Wallace was at the center, helping the children with a craft project when his phone would not stop vibrating. He ignored it the first few times, but when the 10th notification came in, Natalie looked at him with curiosity. Someone really wants to talk to you. It is probably work. I can check it later. But the phone kept vibrating. Finally, Wallace excused himself and went to the hallway to check. There were messages from Tyler, from the company's accountant, from 3 journalists, and even from people he barely knew. All about the same thing. An article in the New York business newspaper. The headline said, "From Scandal to Redemption, Businessman Wallace Schmidt seen working on social projects with heiress Natalie Ross." The article had photos of him at the community center, at the orphanage, and even leaving the charity dinner with Natalie. The text speculated about a possible romance and suggested that Wallace was trying to clean up his image after the viral video. Wallace felt his stomach sink. He went back to the room where Natalie was and showed her the phone. Natalie read quickly, her expression changing from curious to irritated. "Secret romance?" she read aloud. "Public relations strategy? My God, do these journalists not have anything else to do?" "Natalie, I swear I did not." "I know it was not you," she interrupted. "Probably someone from last week's event sold the story." "What do we do?" Natalie thought for a moment, then a mischievous smile appeared on her face. "Let's have a little fun." The next day, Natalie called Wallace with a plan. "Put on something comfortable and meet me at Central Park in an hour. 72nd Street entrance." "Why?" "You will see." When Wallace arrived, he found Natalie wearing jeans, sneakers, and a simple t-shirt, holding 2 pizza boxes and a picnic blanket. "What is this?" "If the press wants a romance, let us give them a romance," she said with an amused smile. "But in our way." They found a place on the grass and spread out the blanket. Natalie opened the pizza boxes and grabbed a huge slice. "See those 2 men over there?" She pointed discreetly to 2 men with professional cameras hiding behind a tree. "Photographers, probably waiting for something scandalous." Wallace looked nervous. "And what are we going to do?" "Be completely normal and boring." Natalie bit into the pizza, letting tomato sauce run down the corner of her mouth. "Oops, do you have a napkin?" Wallace laughed and handed her a napkin. The next few minutes were the strangest and funniest of his life. They talked about completely random things: the weather, the absurd price of ice cream, a particularly cute dog that ran by. "I think they're getting bored," Natalie whispered after half an hour. "How do you know?" One of them yawned. "I saw it from here." Wallace let out a loud laugh. "You are terrible." "No, I am brilliant. There is a difference." They stayed another hour in the park, eating pizza, talking, and occasionally waving discreetly at the frustrated photographers. When they finally left, Natalie was glowing. "Tomorrow the newspapers will publish the most boring photos in history. Couple eats pizza in the park. Nothing sexy, nothing scandalous, just 2 normal people." "You planned all this?" "Of course. If they are going to follow us anyway, at least let it be in our own crisis management." Wallace shook his head, impressed. "You are amazing." "I know," Natalie winked. The next day, as predicted, the photos appeared on a few gossip sites. The headlines were disappointingly normal. Natalie Ross and Wallace Schmidt enjoy quiet afternoon in Central Park. Tyler called Wallace as soon as the photos were out. "Are you 2 really together?" "We are friends, Tyler." "Friends who spend all their free time together?" "Yes, it is possible, believe it or not." "Sure, and I am Santa Claus." Wallace hung up the phone, smiling. The truth is that he himself no longer knew how to define their relationship. Were they friends? Yes, But there was also something more, something neither of them had the courage to name yet. On the following Wednesday, during activities at the center, one of the children asked innocently, "Mr. Wallace, are you and Miss Natalie going to get married?" Wallace almost choked on the water he was drinking. Natalie, who was close enough to hear, let out a laugh. "Why do you ask that, Amy?" Natalie knelt down to the girl's level. "Because you keep looking at each other all the time, just like my parents did before they got married." "We do not keep looking," Wallace began, but Emily, the girl with the terrible dinosaur, interrupted him. "Yes, you do. I saw. You make that silly face when she is not looking." The other children agreed enthusiastically. Wallace felt his face grow warm. "Silly face?" he repeated, mortified. "Like this?" Emily made an exaggerated expression with wide eyes and a silly smile. Natalie laughed so hard she had to hold on to a chair. "Oh my God, she is right. That is exactly the face." "I do not make that face." "Yes, you do," the children shouted together. Wallace looked at Natalie for help, but she was laughing too much to be of any use. "All right, children." Natalie finally pulled herself together. "Enough torturing poor Mr. Wallace. Let us go back to the drawings." But for the rest of the afternoon, whenever Wallace looked at Natalie, the children made kissing sounds. He tried to keep his composure, but it was impossible not to laugh at the absurd situation. When the activities were over and the children had left, Wallace helped Natalie clean up in silence. The atmosphere was different, more charged. "So," Natalie began, putting away colored pencils. "Silly face, huh? Apparently. For the record, you also catch me looking sometimes." Wallace stopped what he was doing. "Really? Really? The children are right. We are terrible at being discreet." "And what do we do about that?" Natalie thought for a moment. "How about being honest?" "Honest how?" "I like spending time with you, Wallace. Very much. And it is not just because you became a dedicated volunteer or because you are trying to be a better person. It is because you make me laugh. You challenge me. You make me want to be better too." Wallace felt his heart speed up. "I feel the same. You have completely changed my life." "Then maybe we should stop pretending we are just friends?" "Are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that maybe we should try to find out what this is. No pressure, no expectations. Just see where it goes." Wallace smiled, feeling a happiness he had not felt in years. "I would love that." "Great. But I will warn you now. If you do something foolish, the children will know before I do. They are like little detectives." "Noted. No foolishness." Natalie laughed, and without thinking, Wallace leaned in and gently kissed her forehead. When he pulled back, they were both surprised by the impulsive action. "I am sorry, I—" "Do not apologize." Natalie touched his face gently. "It was perfect." They stood there for another moment, just looking at each other, until the center coordinator appeared at the door and cleared her throat. "Are you two still here? I will lock up in 15 minutes. "We are already going," Natalie said quickly, laughing. In the parking lot, before they got into their respective cars, Wallace took Natalie's hand. "So officially, what are we now?" "Officially, we are still figuring it out. But unofficially," she smiled, "I think we are starting to be more than just friends." "That works for me." "Great, now go home before I change my mind." Wallace laughed and with one last look, got into the car. As he drove home, he could not stop smiling. Things were changing, and for the first time, Wallace was not afraid of change. He was ready to see where this road would lead him. On the following Saturday, Natalie called Wallace with excitement in her voice. "Wear something that can get dirty. I will pick you up in 20 minutes. "Get dirty? Where are we going?" "It is a surprise." "Oh, and bring sunscreen." 20 minutes later, Natalie parked in front of his building driving an ordinary car, nothing like the luxury vehicles Wallace expected a billionaire heiress to have. "How old is this car?" he asked as he got in. 15. It was my grandmother's. It works perfectly, so why change it? Most people with your money would have at least 3 imported cars." "I am not most people." Natalie started the engine. "And besides, this car has history. My grandmother taught me to drive in it." They drove for 40 minutes until they reached a neighborhood Wallace recognized immediately. It was Queens, but not the gentrified part. It was the area where Natalie had grown up. "Are we?" "Going to visit my old house, the one I shared with my grandmother," Natalie said, parking in front of a modest little house with a well-kept front yard. After she passed away, I kept the property. I could not bring myself to let it go. The house was small but charming, with light yellow paint and windows with floral curtains. Natalie opened the door, and the scent of lavender filled the air. I come here every week to clean and keep everything in order, she explained. It is my refuge when the corporate world gets too heavy. Wallace looked around. The decor was simple but cozy. Photos everywhere showed Natalie at different ages, always beside a woman with a warm smile. Your grandmother seemed amazing. She was. She taught me everything I know about kindness, humility, and the true meaning of wealth. Natalie led him to a small bedroom. There, on a special hanger on the wall, was the red and white plaid dress from the gala. Wallace felt the impact of the words he had said that night come back with full force. There, in that simple room, that dress was not just a piece of clothing. It was a family heirloom, a precious memory, a symbol of love. She wore this dress to her prom. Natalie touched the fabric gently. She met my grandfather that night. She always said it was her lucky outfit. When I inherited the money and was invited to my first charity event, I wanted to honor her memory by wearing this piece. Wallace felt a lump in his throat, and I made fun of it. Yes, you did. Natalie, wait, she raised her hand. Let me finish. When you made that comment, I was devastated, not because of the public humiliation, but because I felt like I had betrayed my grandmother's teachings, as if having money meant I should abandon the simple things she valued. You did not betray anything. I know that now. But that night, I almost gave up on wearing the dress again. I almost gave up on philanthropy too. I thought maybe the world of the rich was not for me. Wallace felt tears sting his eyes. I am sorry. From the bottom of my heart, I am sorry for making you feel that way. Natalie looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. I forgive you, Wallace. Truly. Because you changed, and because I see that comment hurt you as much as it hurt me. Wallace could not hold back any longer. Tears ran freely down his face as he knelt in front of her, holding her hands. I was an arrogant fool who could not see beyond appearances. You showed me that true value has nothing to do with money or status. It has to do with character, kindness, and authenticity. Thank you for giving me a chance to be better. Thank you for not giving up on me. Natalie was crying now, too. She pulled Wallace up to his feet and hugged him tightly. You deserved a second chance. Everyone does. They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other in that small room, surrounded by memories and love. When they finally pulled apart, Natalie wiped her face and smiled. Now that is enough drama. Come on, I want to show you something else. She took him to the backyard, where there was a small garden with tomatoes, herbs, and flowers. My grandmother loved gardening. She used to say that putting your hands in the soil keeps you connected to what really matters. It is beautiful. And it needs care. That is why I told you to wear something you could get dirty. Let's work. Wallace spent the next 2 hours learning how to take care of plants with Natalie. She was patient and funny, laughing when he confused weeds with seedlings and almost pulled out a healthy tomato plant. You are terrible at this. She laughed. I am a tech executive. The only green thing I know is money. Well, now you are going to learn. Look, this is basil. It smells good, see? She rubbed a leaf and held it out for him to smell. It really is good. And this is mint. My grandmother used to make tea with it. They worked side by side, talking about everything and nothing. Wallace realized he had never felt so comfortable with someone. Natalie made him laugh, challenged him, but also accepted him completely. When they were done, they were both covered in dirt, sweaty, and happy. I need to show you one more thing before we go, Natalie said, leading him back into the house. She opened a drawer and took out an old photo album. This was my grandmother when she was young. She pointed to a black and white photo, and here she is wearing the plaid dress for the first time. Wallace looked at the photo. Natalie's grandmother was beautiful, radiant, with the same warm smile he had seen in the more recent pictures. She always said, a beautiful outfit is the one that carries love and memories, not price. Natalie repeated the words she had said before. That is why I wear the dress. Not to make a fashion statement, but to carry her with me in important moments. Wallace looked from the photo to Natalie, seeing the similarity not only in their features, but in the kindness in their eyes. You are just like her. Thank you. That is the greatest compliment anyone can give me. They closed the album, and as they were about to leave, Natalie stopped at the door. Wallace, I brought you here because I wanted you to fully understand who I am. Not the heiress, not the philanthropist, but the Natalie who grew up in this house, who learned to make apple pie with her grandmother, who still keeps her handwritten recipes. I understand, and I like every version of you. Natalie smiled. Good, because if we are going to try this, you need to know all the parts. On the drive back, Wallace was quiet, processing everything he had seen and felt. Natalie looked at him. Are you okay? I am, just thinking about how my life has changed in the last few months. For the better? Infinitely better. Natalie smiled, but then her phone rang. She looked at the screen and her expression changed. It is my Uncle Bernard. Oh no. Trouble? Could be. He rarely calls without a reason. She answered on speakerphone. The voice of an older man, formal and stern, filled the car. Natalie, we need to talk. It is urgent. Hi, Uncle Bernard. About what? About the pictures in the papers. You and that businessman. The same one who humiliated you at the ball. Natalie and Wallace exchanged worried looks. Uncle, that is not. I will have dinner at your house tomorrow at 7, and bring him. I want to meet in person the man who is going out with my niece. The call ended abruptly. Natalie let out a heavy sigh. Well, this is not good. Your uncle seems intense. Bernard is protective, very protective, and he saw the video from the ball several times. He called me furious that day. He hates me. Not yet, but it will be hard to convince him otherwise. Wallace felt his stomach drop. After all the progress, now he would face the judgment of Natalie's family. And something told him it would be much harder than anything he had faced so far. The next day, Wallace spent the whole morning choosing what to wear for the dinner. A suit that was too formal seemed pretentious. Too casual seemed disrespectful. After changing his clothes 5 times, he called Natalie. Calm down, Wallace. It is just a dinner. With your uncle who hates me before even meeting me. He does not hate you, yet. He probably just looks down on you a little. That does not help, Natalie laughed. Wear something comfortable but respectful. Nice jeans and a dress shirt. Nothing extravagant. And Wallace, relax. You have already faced worse things. Like what? Like me, when I ignored you at the ball. If you survive that, you will survive, Bernard. At 7 sharp, Wallace rang the doorbell at Natalie's house. She opened the door wearing black pants and a beige blouse, simple but elegant. Ready for the execution? She joked. Very funny. Hey, at least you are on time. Bernard values that. They walked into the dining room, where 3 people were already waiting. A man in his 60s with gray hair and a stern expression had to be Bernard. Next to him were an elegant woman about the same age and another younger man, maybe 40. Uncle Bernard, Aunt Amelia, Cousin Gregory, Natalie greeted each one. This is Wallace Schmidt. Wallace held out his hand. It is a pleasure to meet you. Bernard shook his hand with unnecessary force, his eyes studying him coldly. Mr. Schmidt, the famous technology businessman. Sir, Wallace swallowed hard. Sit down, Bernard said, motioning to the chair in front of him. Dinner started tense. Aunt Amelia served a delicious roast, but Wallace could barely taste it, with Bernard staring at him after every bite. So, Mr. Schmidt, Bernard began, cutting his own food carefully. Natalie told us that you have been working together on social projects. Yes, sir. I have been a volunteer at the Hope Community Center. How convenient, right after humiliating her in public. Uncle, Natalie protested. It is a fair question, Natalie. Bernard did not take his eyes off Wallace. So, coincidence? Wallace took a deep breath. No, sir. It was not a coincidence. After the ball, I realized I had made a terrible mistake. Not only by humiliating Natalie, but because that comment showed something ugly about who I had become. And you decided to fix it by becoming a volunteer? It sounds opportunistic. It did look that way at first, Wallace admitted, but it was not about opportunism. It was about facing who I was and trying to be better. Gregory, the cousin, leaned forward. I saw the video. Everyone saw it. That was very cruel. It was, and I have no excuse. Then why did you do it? Amelia asked, her voice gentler than the men's. Wallace looked at Natalie, who nodded encouragingly. Because when I looked at Natalie in that dress, I saw something that scared me. She was comfortable being simple, authentic. And I had spent years running away from my own humble roots, surrounding myself with luxury and superficiality. That comment was my own insecurity speaking. At least it is honest, Bernard murmured. Dinner went on with questions that got harder and harder. Gregory asked about his intentions, Amelia about his values, and Bernard about absolutely everything. "And your company?" Bernard asked. "I read that it is seeking investment from the Horizon Foundation." "It was, but that has nothing to do with Natalie." "Does it not? How convenient that the very board member you offended can approve your project." Wallace felt his irritation grow but controlled himself. "With all due respect, sir, if I were using Natalie, I would not have spent months working on social projects without asking for anything in return. And I certainly would not be here being questioned by her family." Natalie held back a laugh. Bernard raised an eyebrow. "He has personality, I will give him that." "Bernard, be fair," Amelia cut in. "The young man is trying." "Trying or acting? That is what I need to find out." Natalie put her fork down on the table firmly. "Enough. Uncle Bernard, I understand that you want to protect me, but this has already gone too far. Natalie, you are very important to this family, and I am old enough to make my own decisions," she cut him off. "Wallace has changed. I saw it. The children at the center saw it. He risked his own safety to save a child in an accident." "Anyone would do that," Bernard said. "But not everyone would do what he did afterward," Natalie went on. "He went back to the neighborhood where he grew up poor. He faced his own past. He learned gardening with me in a tiny garden. Do you think someone doing this out of self-interest would go that far?" Gregory watched everything with interest. "She has a point." "Thank you," Wallace said, unsure. Dinner ended without major explosions, but Bernard still looked suspicious. When Wallace and Natalie were leaving, Bernard pulled him aside. "Mr. Schmidt, a word." Natalie hesitated, but Bernard motioned for her to wait in the car. "Look," Bernard began when they were alone, "I do not trust you. Not yet. But I see something in Natalie that I have not seen in years. Genuine happiness. If you are responsible for that, then maybe you deserve a chance." "Thank you, sir. But," Bernard pointed a finger at him, "if you hurt my niece, if this is some elaborate game, I guarantee you will regret it. I have resources that make your business look like a candy store." Wallace nodded seriously. "I understand, and I promise my intentions are genuine. We will see. Time will tell the truth." In the car, Natalie looked at him anxiously. "What did he say? That he will destroy me if I hurt you?" Classic Bernard, she rolled her eyes. "I am sorry, he is too protective." "No, I understand. If I had a niece like you, I would be the same." Natalie smiled and took his hand. "You did well, better than I expected." "Really?" "Because I feel like I failed miserably." "Bernard is difficult. The fact that you did not run away through the window is already a victory." Wallace laughed, but something still bothered him. "Natalie, your family is never going to fully accept me, are they? They will always see me as the guy from the video." "They will accept you. It just needs time." But Wallace saw the uncertainty in her eyes. The next morning, Wallace was at the office when he received an email that made his heart stop. It was from the Horizon Foundation. The investment his company needed so much had been approved. He should have been happy, but all he felt was worry. He called Natalie right away. "Did you approve the investment?" There was a pause. "Yes, the board voted this morning." "Natalie, this is going to look. It is going to look like I favored you because of our relationship." "I know." "Then why did you do it?" "Because your project is good, Wallace. It has merit on its own. I was not going to let personal politics get in the way of something that can help poor communities." "But your family will understand, eventually." But when Bernard called Natalie that afternoon, his voice was icy. "I saw the investment approval. Did you approve your boyfriend's project?" "Uncle, it was not like that." "It looks exactly like that." "Natalie, you are letting your feelings cloud your professional judgment." Wallace, who was with Natalie when the call came in on speaker, felt the weight of the situation. Her family would never accept him as long as they thought he was using Natalie. And in that moment, Wallace realized what he needed to do. A decision that would change everything. That night, Wallace barely slept. Bernard's furious call echoed in his mind. He knew what he had to do, but the decision weighed on him like lead. The next morning he called his lawyer and accountant. Then he scheduled a press conference for the next day. When Natalie called, he avoided the subject, saying only that he had pending matters at work. "Are you all right?" she asked, worried. I am just taking care of a few things." "Wallace, about what my uncle said." "Natalie, I have to go. I will call you later." He hung up before she could insist. The next day, Wallace was in a conference room full of journalists. Cameras flashed, microphones were adjusted. He took a deep breath and began. "Good morning. I called this press conference to make an important announcement about the future of my company and my personal life." The journalists leaned forward, attentive. "Recently, I received approval for a significant investment from the Horizon Foundation, a project that could expand my company and generate considerable profits." Wallace paused. "I am turning down this investment." Murmurs exploded in the room. "In addition, I'm giving up a $1 million partnership with a multinational tech company that has been under negotiation for months." The murmurs turned into shouted questions. Wallace raised his hand, asking for silence. "Instead, I will redirect these resources to create a community development fund in Brooklyn, the neighborhood where I grew up. The fund will support education, mentoring programs, and entrepreneurship opportunities for young people from low-income communities." "Mr. Schmidt," a journalist shouted, "does this have anything to do with the accusations that you are using your relationship with Natalie Ross for your own benefit?" Wallace looked directly at the camera. "It has everything to do with it. I have learned in the last few months that true success is not measured in profits or investments, but in the positive impact we create. And I will not allow my presence in Natalie's life to be stained by suspicion of self-interest." Another journalist raised her hand. "Are you confirming a relationship with Miss Ross?" "I am confirming that she changed my life. She showed me there is a better way to live, to do business, to be a human being. And if her family or anyone else thinks I am with her for interest, this decision proves the opposite." The questions went on for another 20 minutes. When it finally ended, Wallace was exhausted but relieved. His phone exploded with messages. Tyler called 17 times. Investors sent desperate emails, but the only call that mattered never came. Natalie did not call. 2 hours later, Wallace was in the apartment when the doorbell rang. It was Natalie, and she did not look happy. "Have you lost your mind?" She came in like a storm. "Turning down the investment? Walking away from the partnership? Wallace, this is your career." "I know what it is." "Then why did you do it?" "Because your family will never accept me while they think I am using you, and because I realized they are right to be suspicious." "They are not right." "Yes, they are, Natalie. Think about it. I show up out of nowhere after humiliating you. I start working where you work. I get close to you, and suddenly my company receives a $1 million investment that you approved? It looks suspicious even to me." Natalie stopped pacing, taking that in. "But you really changed. I saw it. I know that. You know that. But no one else knows, and I will not let our relationship be questioned forever. I will not let you have to choose between me and your family. That is not your decision to make. It is, yes, because I love you." The silence that followed was deafening. Wallace realized what he had just said. Natalie stared at him, eyes wide. "You? What?" "I love you," Wallace repeated, calmer now. "I love you, Natalie, and that is why I need to prove to everyone, including your family, that I am not here for the money or the connections. I am here for you." Natalie stayed quiet for a long moment. Then, to Wallace's surprise, she started to laugh. "You are impossible, you know that?" "What?" "You give up millions of dollars, cause a scandal in the press, and tell me you love me, all on the same day. Could you not be normal for 5 minutes?" Wallace did not know whether to laugh or be offended. "I am sorry for not being normal when I declare my love." "No," Natalie walked up to him, her eyes shining. "I am sorry for making myself love you back before I had time to get ready." Wallace's heart stopped. "You love me?" "Obviously. Why else would I put up with you?" Wallace pulled her into a hug, and for the first time in days, he felt that everything would be okay. But the happiness did not last long. The next day, Bernard showed up at Natalie's place without warning. Wallace was there, and the tension in the air was heavy. "I saw the press conference," Bernard said, his voice neutral. "Uncle?" "Let me talk, Natalie." Bernard turned to Wallace. "It was a smart move. turning down the investment publicly, giving that beautiful speech about community. It was not a move, Wallace said firmly. No? Then what was it? A grand romantic gesture? A sacrifice for the woman you love? It was the right thing to do. Bernard studied him for a long moment. Will your company survive without those investments? It will. It will be harder, but it will. And you do not regret it? Not at all. Bernard nodded slowly. Maybe I judged you wrong. Natalie and Wallace exchanged surprised looks. Maybe, Bernard went on, you are not the opportunist I thought you were. But I still have my doubts. Uncle, Natalie protested. No, Natalie, he needs to hear this, Bernard looked at Wallace. You say you love her. You proved it by giving up money. But love is not proved once. It is proved every day, in small and big choices. I know that, sir. Good, because if you hurt my niece, if all this is just a phase, a temporary redemption, you will wish you had never set foot at that ball. Understood. Bernard turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Oh, and Schmidt, the Foundation's annual charity ball is in 2 weeks. Same place as last year. Natalie will be there. You should be there too. He left, leaving Wallace and Natalie confused. What did he mean by that? Wallace asked. I do not know, but I know my uncle. He is planning something. Something good or bad? With Bernard, it could be either one. In the 2 weeks that followed, Wallace continued his work at the community center and began to develop the community fund he had announced. The press followed him constantly, documenting his transformation. Tyler called one last time. Man, did you really throw everything away for a woman? I did not throw anything away, Tyler. I found something much more valuable. You have gone crazy, completely crazy. Probably, but I am happy like this. Tyler hung up, and Wallace realized he did not miss the superficial friendship they had. On the day of the ball, Wallace was nervous. He put on a simple suit, nothing extravagant. Not the same expensive suit from the year before, but one he had bought in a regular store. When he arrived at the Grand Hotel, the memories of that terrible night came back strongly. But this time, it was different. He was not there to show off or impress. He was there for Natalie, and he was about to find out what Bernard had planned. The Grand Hotel ballroom was exactly as Wallace remembered. Crystal chandeliers, tables decorated with expensive flowers, people dressed in their finest clothes. But this time, he did not feel superior. He only felt nervous. Wallace looked around for Natalie in the crowd. When he finally saw her, his heart stopped. She was wearing the red and white plaid dress, the same dress he had made fun of a year earlier. Her grandmother's dress. Natalie saw him at the same time and smiled, walking toward him. But before they could greet each other, Bernard appeared on the stage, taking the microphone. Good evening, everyone, his voice echoed through the room. Welcome to the Horizon Foundation's annual charity ball. Wallace and Natalie exchanged confused looks. Tonight is special for several reasons, Bernard continued. First, because we raise funds for important causes. Second, because we have the chance to correct mistakes from the past. Wallace's stomach dropped. Exactly 1 year ago, in this same ballroom, we witnessed an unfortunate moment. A cruel comment that went viral on social media and stained what should have been a celebration of generosity. People started whispering, remembering. Some looked at Wallace. Wallace Schmidt, Bernard called him directly. Would you come up to the stage, please? Natalie squeezed his hand. You do not have to. Yes, I do, Wallace murmured. It is all right. He walked to the stage with shaking legs, aware of all the cameras and eyes fixed on him. When he reached Bernard's side, the older man looked at him with an expression that was impossible to read. Mr. Schmidt, a year ago you made a comment about my niece's dress. Would you repeat what you said? The silence in the room was absolute. Wallace took the microphone with trembling hands. I said, did someone get lost from the period costume party? Whispers broke out again. And why did you make that comment? Bernard asked. Wallace looked at Natalie, who was in the front row, her eyes full of emotion. Because I was arrogant, superficial. I judged people by their appearance and status. That dress represented everything I was trying to forget about my own humble origins, and by making fun of it, I was making fun of the part of myself I was ashamed of. Bernard nodded. And what would you say to Natalie now, if you could go back to that night? Wallace stepped down from the stage and walked over to Natalie. He held out his hand to her. May I? Natalie, with tears in her eyes, placed her hand in his. He led her to the center of the ballroom, exactly where he had made the cruel comment a year earlier. "If I could go back to that night," Wallace said into the microphone, but looking only at her, "I would say that your dress is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Not because of the stitching or the fabric, but because of the love and memory it carries. I would say that you are extraordinary for honoring your grandmother this way, and I would ask, with all humility, for the honor of dancing with you." Natalie let out a tearful laugh. "Are you asking me to dance now?" "I am, 1 year late, but I am." The music started to play, and Wallace realized that Bernard had planned everything. He pulled Natalie into a slow dance while everyone watched. "You are shaking," Natalie whispered. "I am terrified. Your whole family is looking at me." "My whole family is seeing you make things right," she corrected. "There is a difference." They danced in silence for a few moments. Then Wallace stopped in the middle of the dance floor. "Natalie Ross," he said, still with the microphone on. "1 year ago, I made the worst mistake of my life by judging the most extraordinary woman I have ever met just because of a dress. Since then, you have taught me that a person's true worth is not in what he or she wears or owns, but in the heart." Tears were running freely down Natalie's face now. "You have shown me that true wealth is kindness. It is humility. It is making a difference in people's lives without expecting anything in return. And your heart, Natalie, is worth more than all the gold in the world." Wallace knelt down in front of her, and the whole ballroom held its breath. "I do not have a ring yet, because this happened faster than I planned, but I need to ask. Would you give me the honor of building a life together where what matters is love, not appearances? Where we can be simple and authentic and still be extraordinary?" Natalie looked at him, then at her family in the front row. Bernard had tears in his eyes. Aunt Amelia was smiling. Even Gregory seemed moved. "Wallace Schmidt," Natalie said, pulling him up to his feet, "you are completely impossible. You know that?" "I have been told that. You show up in my life, annoy me, challenge me, give up millions of dollars, and now you officially ask me to be your boyfriend in the middle of a gala without even having a ring? When you put it that way, it sounds bad." "It is terrible," she laughed through her tears. "It is the most disorganized and imperfect thing anyone has ever done." "So, is that a no?" "It is a yes, you fool. Of course it is a yes." The ballroom exploded in applause. Wallace pulled her into a tight hug, and for the first time in his life he did not care who was watching or what they thought. Bernard went up on stage again. "Well, that was unexpected," he said dryly, but there was a smile on his face. "But considering that my original test was only to make you apologize in public, I think you went beyond that, Schmidt." "Test?" Wallace asked, still holding Natalie. "Of course. Did you think I would simply invite you to a ball? I wanted to see if you had the courage to face the same place where you made the mistake. And you not only came, you completely redeemed yourself." "Uncle Bernard," Natalie scolded, "you are terrible." "I am protective. There is a difference." The music started again, and Wallace and Natalie went back to dancing. This time, other people joined them on the dance floor, but they barely noticed. "So," Wallace murmured in her ear, "officially dating?" "Officially. And you are going to buy a real ring before you propose marriage, right?" "Wait, who said anything about marriage?" Natalie raised an eyebrow. "You just made a speech about building a life together in front of 300 people." "Well, yes. But, Wallace Schmidt, do not start regretting it now." "I am not regretting it. I am just processing that this is really happening." "Well," Natalie smiled, "process it fast, because I am not letting you get away now." They kept dancing, while the camera flashes captured every moment, but this time, the photos were not of humiliation. They were of love, redemption, and new beginnings. Later that night, when the event was ending, the children from the Hope Community Center, whom Bernard had invited especially, surrounded Wallace and Natalie. "Are you two going to get married?" Emily asked excitedly. "Eventually," Natalie answered, laughing. "I told you," Sophie cheered. "I said they made that silly face at each other," Wallace laughed, no longer embarrassed. "Yes, Sophie, you were absolutely right." While the children jumped around them celebrating, Wallace looked around the ballroom. 1 year earlier, he had arrived there full of arrogance, showiness, and emptiness. Today he was leaving with humility, authenticity, and love. "What are you thinking about?" Natalie asked. "That sometimes we need to make the worst mistakes to find the best things." Philosophical. I like that. "And I am also thinking that your plaid dress is the most beautiful one in this ballroom." Natalie smiled, touching the skirt of her grandmother's dress. "Do you approve?" "More than approve. I love it. Because now I understand what it represents. Love, memory, authenticity. Everything that really matters." They danced one last time while the ballroom was emptying. The same place that had witnessed the humiliation now celebrated the triumph. The same dress that had been mocked was now admired, and the same two hearts that had been hurt were now beating in sync. "Ready to go?" Natalie asked when the music stopped. "Ready. Where are we going?" "Home. Our home eventually. But first I want pizza. I am starving." Wallace laughed. "Pizza after a gala ball? Do you have a problem with that?" "None. Pizza is perfect." They left the Grand Hotel hand in hand, leaving the past behind and walking toward a future built on real values: respect, humility, authenticity, and above all, genuine love. What did you think of Natalie and Wallace's story? Leave your opinion in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score do you give? Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to follow all our stories, and be sure to watch more emotional stories by clicking here on the final screen.